You felt everything in that room. The tension nobody acknowledged. The shift in someone's energy the moment a specific topic came up. The specific weight of a silence that everyone else treated as nothing. You felt all of it, completely, precisely, at full intensity. And you said absolutely nothing. Not because you had nothing to say, because somewhere between feeling it and expressing it, something quietly intervened. Something that has been intervening your entire life. And most people who know you have no idea it is even happening because from the outside you look calm, measured, sometimes even distant, while on the inside you are processing more than most people in that room will feel all day. This gap between everything you feel and almost nothing you say is not emotional dysfunction. It is not repression in the clinical sense. It is not shyness, not coldness, not indifference. It is something more specific than any of those labels. And once you understand precisely what it is and where it came from, the way you see yourself in social situations will shift permanently. But before we get there is one specific emotion that people like you feel more intensely than almost any other, and express less than almost any other. An emotion so layered and so private that most people who carry it have never had it accurately described to them. We will name it precisely before this video ends. And when we do, you will feel recognized in a way that does not happen often. First, here is what is actually happening in the gap between what you feel and what you say. Every person develops what psychologists call an expression threshold, the internal level an emotion needs to reach before it gets externalized. For most people, this threshold is relatively low. They feel something, they show it. They think something, they say it. The gap between internal experience and external expression is small and crossed easily. Your threshold is not low. It is significantly higher than average. And that means emotions that would prompt an immediate visible reaction in most people, frustration, hurt, excitement, affection, stay entirely internal in you until they reach a level of intensity that most of those emotions never actually hit. So from the outside, you appear to feel less, while from the inside, you are feeling everything at a depth most people never reach. Here is the strange part. That high threshold did not arrive randomly. It was built, carefully, gradually, through specific experiences that taught you, not in words but in accumulated emotional logic, that expressing what you feel creates more problems than it solves. Maybe you expressed something once and it was minimized, made to seem dramatic or excessive relative to the situation. Maybe you showed someone how much something mattered to you and that information was used against you later. Maybe you grew up in an environment where emotional expression was not safe, not modeled, or simply not acknowledged, where feeling things openly produced no response, and you learned over time that the feeling was yours alone to carry. Whatever the specific origin, the lesson your nervous system absorbed was the same. Feeling is private. Expression is a risk. And the gap between the two is where you learn to live. Most people completely miss how much intelligence went into building that gap. It was not shut down. It was strategy. A way of protecting the interior world from the people and environments that had demonstrated they were not equipped to receive it carefully. But here is where it gets really interesting. Because that strategy, effective as it was in the context that created it, does not always stay in that context. It travels with you into relationships that are nothing like the original environment, into moments where expression would actually be safe, where the person across from you is genuinely capable of receiving what you feel. And the gap activates anyway, not because the current situation requires it, but because the pattern is older than the situation and runs automatically before your conscious mind has assessed whether it is actually needed. This is why you sometimes feel completely alone in the presence of people who genuinely care about you. Not because the care is not real. Because the pattern that protects you from being hurt by expression does not distinguish between safe and unsafe. It simply activates. And you feel everything alone again, in a room full of people who would have stayed if you had let them in. Have you ever been in a moment, a genuinely important one, where you wanted to say something real, felt it completely, and then heard yourself say something small and peripheral instead? Not because you could not find the words. Because something intervened between the feeling and the sentence and replaced it with something manageable. Something that revealed nothing. Something that kept the interior world exactly where it has always lived, private, protected, and entirely your own. That substitution happens so fast you barely notice it. but it happens every time. And the person across from you receives the small peripheral sentence and has no idea that something significant just went unsaid. Now, here is the emotion I mentioned at the very beginning. The one you feel most intensely and express least. The one that sits at the center of this entire pattern. It is not sadness. It is not anger. It is longing. Specifically, the longing to be known. Not understood in a general sense. Known. The specific, quiet, persistent ache of wanting someone to see the full interior version of you, not the measured, carefully edited version you present and stay. To not require you to make yourself smaller or more manageable or less intense before they are willing to be close to you. That longing is the reason the gap is so painful to live with. Because the gap was built to protect you from people who could not handle the full version of what you feel. But the thing you are most protecting, your full interior world, is also the thing you most want to share with someone who is capable of receiving it. And the same protection that kept you safe is the thing standing between you and the connection you have been looking for. This is not a simple problem with a clean solution. You cannot simply decide to lower the threshold and immediately feel safe expressing what you feel. The pattern is older than the decision. It runs below the level of conscious choice. And anyone who tells you to just open up more without acknowledging what that advice costs has never actually lived inside this gap. What actually helps is something more gradual and more honest than that. It is learning to distinguish in real time in specific moments between the gap activating because the situation genuinely calls for protection and the gap activating out of pure habit in a moment that does not actually require it. Not overriding it. Not forcing expression before it feels safe. But pausing long enough to ask, is this protection I currently need? Or is this an old response running in a new situation that does not require it? That pause is where everything begins to shift. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in small, specific moments where you let something real surface that would have previously stayed internal, and discover that the world did not end. That the person across from you moved toward you rather than away. That being known, even partially, even briefly, feels nothing like the risk you were trained to believe it was. You feel everything. That has always been true. And it has always been the most significant thing about you. Not the gap that formed around it, not the silence that protected it, but the depth of what lives underneath both. The right people will not need you to be less. They will simply need you to let them close enough to finally feel what you have always felt. And that, quietly, in your own time, on your own terms, is exactly what you are allowed to do.